Well, I'm delighted on behalf of Cork City Libraries to welcome everyone to this evening's event, where I'll be discussing with Tina Pisco her time as Cork City Writers' first writer in residence 2021. So welcome, Tina, and I look forward to chatting to you. So for those who don't know, Tina has been a professional writer for over 30 years. She started out as a news reporter and journalist for the Brussels News Corp. Her work spans every medium except radio, but includes comics and internet drama. She has published novels, as well as collections of poetry, newspaper columns, and short stories. As you said, in 2020, she was appointed as the first writer in residence for Cork City Libraries, and she's currently working on her second collection of stories. So we're looking forward to hearing a bit about those later on this evening. So, Tina, your work as writer in residence. How did you find adapting to the new normal? Because I suppose when you were appointed 2021, I suppose was looking slightly different. 2020, I suppose it was a shifting goalpost, but I mean, it's been the full 6 months of this year. You haven't had, sort of direct access. So
the full, it was 7 months and the full thing was remote, entirely remote. And I think if we'd known that when we started, we probably would have panicked, As it was, I proposed right away that we should, I proposed right away that we should function as if we were going to be remote, and then, because it was easier to go that way, So set up workshops and events that would be remote, and hopefully by the spring, we'd be able to do them in person. And then, what happened. This funny thing happened and we got locked down and the whole thing was remote. So Zoom workshops, Zoom events, and for example, Patricia and Pauline, who I have to thank for a wonderful residency. We never met, we just did this on email, phone call, Zoom, and all the projects were run that way,
And did you find, as a writer, I know myself, like the tech side of things, was that an issue, or how did you?
An issue, but I was very lucky in that Poetry Ireland, God bless them, last year at the first lockdown, they had like a major meeting. There was over 30 writers, and they kind of went, what do you need? How are you functioning? How's your mental health?
Okay.
I thought, yeah, great, they're using up their budgets. But they came back and went, okay, you guys need training in running Zoom workshops, copyright, child protection, all these which you wouldn't have thought of. And they ran a series of workshops, and I found those just, invaluable.
Brilliant. And then in terms of the workshops yourself, the whole kind of theme of the residency was around climate change and creative engagement with climate change, and there was fiction and non-fiction workshops. How did you find in those sort of Zoom workshops that you did, what when you discussed climate change, what was students' concerns? What were they, what did it end up being that they kind of wrote? Because you talked about kind of flash fiction and poetry. Like, how did the dialogue and the conversations go?
There were two different streams, if you like. There was the fiction stream and there was the non-fiction stream. The one thing they had in common, which kind of, I have to say, shocked me, was at the end of both series of workshops, you had people saying, I'd never really thought about climate change that much, or I never really thought about positive solutions, and I'm like, what do you mean? I mean, what world do you live in? But hey, great, So with both, there was a kind of a first engagement, which was to make people think about, what does that mean? What does that mean to me? Whether it's, and even just with like stream of consciousness words, let's just get it out there, see what sparks the imagination, With the creative writing, then we were looking, I did exercises with them like, okay, find an image. What's the image? Some was drought, some were fire, some were that polar bear just hanging on that tiny little bit of ice. Write about that, put yourself there, write some fiction based on that, The one I found really interesting, because that's creative writing, you know yourself.
It's kind of free associate, yeah.
You just give them prompts and you get them writing. The nonfiction was very interesting because of my background as a journalist, you know, it was very interesting to kind of say to people, okay, this is creative nonfiction. What's
yes.
that? And what it is, it's accurate, right?
Yes.
You had to go through, what does accurate mean? Well, it means you check. You don't just say, you know, oh, all the bees are gone. You know, you got to be able to back that with go back. So it's research, you know.
Yeah.
Creative nonfiction is about using the techniques of literary fiction, but to write something which is accurate and which is real. You know? So you have to back it with research. And that was, I think, interesting to get people writing in that, with that kind of journalistic and I don't think I've taught creative nonfiction, but it's been more memoir based. You know?
Yeah.
The reason it was nonfiction was simply because it really happened to me, you know?
Yes.
It was different, and I really enjoyed that, and I think there's a place there for that sort of writing that isn't taught that much, you know?
Yeah. No, I think you're right.
A lot, but you know, go look for a workshop that actually is a journalistic approach, you know. And it was important for the climate change thing. And at the end, in fact, some of those people, their work will be in an anthology that's going to be published in September, which is Cork Words.
Yes.
And, that was really, you know, because we went sometimes in workshops, you know, it's just about getting people writing. Here we went from, you know, the initial push to the finished, polished, edited thing, you know, and that was great.
Because it's funny, just you're talking there, and it makes me think about something that I'm quite interested in, is presenting people with facts doesn't seem to change minds the same way presenting people with personal stories or interactions. You know, the kind of work you're doing there, actually people go away and go, didn't think about it like that. It seems to open a space in people's minds, because I think there's a huge problem.
I do believe as well, which is why I'm writing the stories I'm writing. I think it was, well, I can't remember his name now. He wrote the book, The Overstory, but there was a quote that I used in all of my workshops, which was, you will never win an argument by telling people facts. You will never change minds by telling people facts, but you will change minds by telling them a story. So it's kind of almost going back to that idea of the parable, you know?
Yeah. Well, it works, yeah.
Because narrative, you know, even the structure of narrative is so powerful in human beings, and it's global. And somehow we kind of latch, I see right, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think I remember seeing that really famous picture with the kind of refugee crisis, which was at its peak a few years ago with the poor child, remember, the washed up on the beach in Turkey. That one image about one thing, specific child, had more power than a figure saying 10,000 people, you know, were on boats to Spain, or, you know, it's amazing how, and I think that's where your stories actually really come in, because once it's brought down to an individual human story and how they're being impacted by a situation, then suddenly we can relate to it. You know, it becomes a thing that people go, oh, okay, we need to start taking this seriously. It's a real, it turns into a real thing. The part of your residency, I just was having a look over it here, you went to a UNESCO workshop with Lynn Buckle, is that correct? Yeah. How did you find that? It was put the planet in your prose. Was there anything?
It was really, really good. And I fought it a little bit at the beginning because, you know, when you're writing about climate change, and particularly if you have, you know, I love science fiction, I love fantasy, I love magical realism, that sort of thing. And it's very easy to be taken away by the dystopia of it all. And she was like banging on that we had to put positive climate solutions into our prose, you know, and that was hard sometimes. It's a lot easier to go, we're all going to die, you know, than to propose that. What was great too is that in the end, that group of writers, some are, you know, really polished writers. Some are just beginning writers. But that group of writers has become Ireland's first climate change writing group. And we're, exchanging stuff a lot. And I've always been looking for a writing group. And so I'm very happy to be in that,
That's brilliant. I think I saw a post about it today. Actually, was that be right on Months Literature? Yeah, I did see that.
To others,
Brilliant. That's
like
fantastic.
This is an international organization,
Oh, okay.
Writers groups around the world, in a way that writers trying to also, play their part in trying to avert possibly the apocalypse or adapt, because I'm not too sure we can avert it, by the way, but we can adapt to it.
Because I think that's an interesting challenge that you're opposed to, that UNESCO thing of offering solutions, because I suppose just the tendency for a writer to just pose the question and leave it hanging is
as a writer, dramatically, for the narrative, dystopia, that's fantastic. You can have, there's an ego and a kind of a, I do this because I love doing it. It's fun, and it's fun to write dystopias.
Yeah.
So it was really, I struggled in the first few weeks, I kept coming out and going, she keeps wanting to have positive climate solutions, and, we're all going to die. It's true. You have to, and she was also, I have to say, a superb workshop leader in the fact that she gave us references. She gave us a 100 book list, 100 different books, not nonfictions, novels, etc. And I've been, working my way through that. So that was great, and resources and etc. So in that sense, it was really useful. In the writing, maybe not so much. I didn't do a massive amount of writing in the workshop, but I had writing going on, so I could use them to
kind of inform
workshop some of the stories as well.
Yeah. Did you, as part of you hosted an event as part of World Book Festival with Conal Creedon and Sarah Baum, and I just was in because I loved Sarah's second book, and now I can't remember the name, but it's just the nature in it is so beautifully written, kind of hedgerows, and she has a beautiful I have it downstairs.
With a line. Yes.
A line made by walking.
A line made by walking.
Yes, and so I'm curious to know, you've just said about the UNESCO thing about coming up with climate solutions. Did you feel your fellow writers were optimistic about what they could achieve, or what was
that event? Because, and a lot of people asked me, they said to me, why did you invite Conal Creedon and Sarah Baum? They're not activists, they're not, engaged in the writing. And I said, well, that's why I did. I wanted to it would have been easy to have kind of very sort of left-wing progressive, I'm not saying they're not, but that really use their writing. I'm obviously just, enmeshed in feminist writing and that sort of thing. And I thought it would be interesting to see their take on it. Conal's take, you can imagine, it was very much, no, I just write these silly little stories for me, and, and Sarah, she's so enmeshed with the nature now,
Yeah.
But I thought it was an interesting conversation, between three very different writers.
Well, a conversation with three people agreeing and having exactly the same viewpoint isn't as interesting as three different viewpoints. No. I just was curious with Sarah in particular, because she's so nature driven, as you said, things like the bees vanishing, and when her work is so enmeshed there. Well, that's brilliant. And the final thing I was going to ask, and I didn't know if it went ahead or not with the year, you were working with Mary Morrissey, is that?
Well, that's more with my short stories, yes.
Okay, so maybe we'll talk about that a bit later. Yeah,
she's been fabulous. Yeah.
So as part of this residency, it seems to be one of the major parts of the things that you were doing was about this Many Tongues collaborative project that you're working on that ran from January to May, and you're saying that fingers crossed will launch the final kind of video for Heritage Week in August. Could you tell me how the project came about? How the group came together, and what were the aims?
I was the thing about having a residency is somewhere you want you want to put your own kind of stamp on it, you know, which is where like the creative nonfiction was really, really good. I'm not Irish and I'm not from the city and I'm a blow-in and I've lived here for 28 years and I'm multicultural and multilingual. I speak, and when I say I speak 3 languages, I was raised in 3 languages. There's, you know, it's not because I'm smart or anything, you know, my parents just dumped me in a school and said, here, speak Spanish, you know, speak English. Spanish is my mother tongue. So I was trying to think, well, what could I do that actually both reflects Cork City, because it's Cork City Libraries, and myself, you know, what I've brought, if you like, to writing in the last 28 years. So I was very keen on having a multilingual or a multicultural, you know, that side of Cork City, which is both what's changed, I think, the most since I moved here, and it's wonderful. You know, I mean, look at the restaurants, you know.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, it's just wonderful, you know. And this Many Tongues project, which is also, there's also a project called the Good Day Cork, which is all good news about Cork, but they're all multilingual, you know, and they come from all over the world, and they've made Cork City, or Cork City, it was more than county, there was all Cork City people. They've made Cork City their home. Many of them have families that they're raising in this kind of multicultural sort of soup that I was raised in. Many of them are here because they married an Irishman or an Irish woman, or, you know. So I reached out to them and to Joanna, who is the founder, and they were, you know, very keen. And I'm very proud of it, because one of the things I've always loved, I think you'll kind of remember where our days back in Tickfilly, I love things that grow organically, but it doesn't always work. You know?
Yes.
You know, you say, okay, I am not going to, I'm facilitating, but I'm not going to push this, you know? And in there you had people who wrote, people who didn't really write, didn't know where we were going. And we started out with, I'd say maybe about 10 participants. We met on Zoom and we talked. We talked about climate change. We talked about our, you know, countries of origin or countries we'd lived in, and Ireland, and how, and children. It ended up that most of us were women. In fact, it ended up at the end that we were all women. So we just had all of these exchanges, and I was kind of pushing them to write a little bit of anything about our exchanges. So a bit of poetry was coming up, a bit of this, a bit of that, you know, still not knowing where we were going. And then at one point, maybe say 2 or 3 times in, it was like, okay, we need to pull focus here.
Okay.
So I asked them all to write a list of words that they, you know, kind of connected with. And I mean, these were words like, obviously, like drought or flood, but also sanctuary, you know. And so we had these lists of words, and then we asked each one to translate them into their language. And we had Ndebele, which is from Zimbabwe. We had Spanish, we had French, I did French, we have Italian, we have, what was the language from, was it Urdu? And then because both the 2 South American women, they also put in the native tribal languages. So we ended up with these long lists of words in all these different languages, and more bits of poetry that everybody was doing. And so it seemed like we were moving towards a poetry film.
Yes.
Like if we hadn't been in lockdown, I might have done the sort of thing I've done in the past. I worked in the Triskel at one point. You know, remember when I was doing Catch the Moon? And
yes, the collaborative.
Ensemble poetry. We might have had an event where we were all there and we were reading it, and there were projections or there was music, but that wasn't possible. So we ended up with a poetry film. So you've got we all recorded the various words and the bits of poetry, we recorded ourselves. And then Joanna, who is working as editor. She's putting this film together, you know, and we'll see, you know, I mean, I only have the trailer now, but I think it'll be good. And who knows, maybe the hope is that maybe then we might use that to get some more funding, to get someone else to maybe put it together more professionally. We've talked about using a beautiful Pakistani artist who lives in the city, maybe to do some animation, you know, so grow it again organically, but you know, longer. At the moment, I think we're about 15. It's about a 15-minute project, you know.
But there's a short, I suppose, taster or kind of preview that's up there now, so you get a flavour. So if anyone is watching this, go onto the Cork City Libraries website. It's up there to have a look, and you get a sense of the mood, because it has that. Already, it's only a snippet, but you do get the mood of the languages and the voices and the.
I think is lovely is that, you know, sometimes like in my poetry, I've used 3 languages at the same time within the poem because it's about the music, you know, the music of the language, the sounds of it, you know, and this project really brought that out. And there's some gorgeous stuff in there, you know, I mean, young Italian from Sardinia, she's talking about, you know, the Mediterranean. Then you have this woman from Pakistan who's talking about her childhood, you know, and the games they used to play. So there's a bit of everything in there, you know.
So it's really giving a new viewpoint of Cork that maybe, which as it is now, rather than maybe, as you said, as the way it was 20 years ago, which is sounds wonderful. So yeah, early August, keep an eye out, people. So actually, no, you've answered my questions on that. The final, I suppose, and a big part of the residency is your own work and developing your own writing. The first thing I was going to ask is, it's the collection at the moment has the title The Dithering Tales, or Tales from the Peri-Apocalypse. Yes. So yeah, could you even talk to that, or how that?
I think, you know, it was a great fit being the first writer in residence because of the theme, because I'd already started on this project, you know, so it was part of my proposal. What's interesting is I called it the dithering because that's where we are now, you know. You know, in 50 years' time, they'll look back and they'll go, yes, that was the dithering. That's when we just dithered. I have to say that in the last 12 months, it's starting to feel less like the dithering and more like the tipping, you know, the edge of the cliff.
Yes.
So I hope I don't have to change it's published. But yeah, it's the dithering. And Tales from the Peri-Apocalypse, and that's a word I made up, but it comes from perimenopausal. When you're perimenopausal, you get a blood test, and then your doctor says to you, oh, you don't have the menopause yet, but it's on the way. They know, you know, it's coming. It's not the apocalypse yet, but it's coming. Even though, frankly, it's not the apocalypse yet for us. Here in Ireland, or maybe even in the West, even though even in the West, there have been places where they've been hit.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of places in the world where it is already there, you know, whether it's drought or fire or floods or, you know, the heat wave at the moment. You know?
But even Australia with the fires that burned the size of Europe or something was insane, the fires there. So it's funny, the dithering, because the first thing I thought of, I remember reading somewhere about when human beings on an individual level have to choose between 2 unpleasant things, and there's no other option between, they won't make a decision. They just find it impossible. If it's been a good thing and a bad thing, it's so easy, it's straightforward. But if it's between 2 uncomfortable things, which is what we're kind of facing right now, is, well, one is particularly worse because it's probably the end of humanity as we know it, but we don't seem to be able to just, the other route, which is probably going to be quite a hard old road, that we seem to be just going, oh, there's going to be some other way out of this, you know. You know, it's not true. So no, I really like the title, and I suppose even when you starting with the story, I was just curious to know, where do you start? What's the first? Do you start with the challenge of the climate change, or maybe do you start with character, and how do your stories begin?
The thing that I started out with in my mind, which is why it is the dithering, okay, so whatever about positive climate solutions. These are about people who somehow are dithering in a sense, or are being pushed into. So what I wanted to do was to write stories like I normally write, you know, so no difference, you know, stories about love, or stories about betrayal, or funny stories, but that the theater dressing, you know, the context, the setting and the time was all at the same, was this peri-apocalyptic. So that, for example, I sent it to you, you know, in The Dithering, the actual title story, it's just raining all the time. This guy...
Notice that every story you sent me, weather is like the extra character, if you know what I mean. It's the extra, and more than just sort of pathetic fallacy, it's beyond that. It's as you said, because the theme really is about, like, this guy is worried about his wife and his girlfriend, and he's walking past food lines, you know, and I think that's, you know, like, there is problems in the world, and he is just so, I mean, he's not a pleasant person, particularly, I don't think, at all.
Cork City.
Oh, I didn't actually pick up, you know, well, he enraged me, because I just thought he was a terrible human being, because even when all this is going on, he's looking at the next woman. He's just, you know, he's in the barmaid, and, you know, so, no, but I did think...
Those guys,
yes,
you know, you would find after work in any bar in Cork City, you know, those guys who are kind of dithering before going home to the wife in the suburbs, you know. Those guys are just walking through the rain, you know, they're not, they're getting wet, mind you.
Because there's definitely, I mean, the other thing there is this tension between the genders, definitely, maybe other than Madame, which I suppose is your kind of background. You said you're writing about kind of female voices, and some of the, because Eugene is also totally contemptible in the fact that he left his girlfriend in the McDonald's, is, because it's funny, when that story opened up, I was like, she doesn't, all these little things are irritating her, and I was like, I'm just waiting now for why, if there's something bigger going, like, it's just so obvious, you're kind of waiting, and then you're going, oh my goodness, how is she even in the same room as him after doing that? You know, how is she, but I suppose, as you said, she's dithering. But then I suppose that is one story where the dithering, she does make a choice at the end of the story, and
it's kind of open-ended, but I think she does make a choice. Yeah.
I mean, we don't know how the choice unfolds, but she has, you know, the whole thing of not text, you know, kind of that she's done with him. She's finally...
She didn't really realize she did it, and, you know, it's afterwards that she realizes, oh yeah, I actually didn't, you know. So we have, at the moment, we have rain.
Yes, rain.
We have a fire. There's, I can't remember what I sent you. I mean, there's an immigration story with Marika.
Well, one was the story Drag Race, which reminding me slightly, I suppose, that Margaret Atwood kind of world of females being, you know, attacked, and, you know, their rights being taken away one by one. But then at the end, the fact that they can transform into men and sort of sneak under the cover kind of undermines the entire premise of women being different. You know what I mean? I just thought that was well done. The way, how do they escape? Well, they pretend to be men, and
they're interesting to me, because when I sent it in to the Stinging Fly, and Lisa McInerney was editor, and she said, well, she didn't accept it, but she said, oh, there's a novel there. You know, you can't just leave them there. You have to write more. So I don't see a novel, but I think we will come back. I have 3 stories that involve these, but they might not be from the same point of view. You know, I'm having a lot of fun with the genre. You know, with what can you do with the short story? You know, and these stories, they're still like what I sent you. They're very rough, because what I want is, I want them to be linked without being linked. In the sense that I'm not necessarily going to have characters from, you know, like in Ghost Written, you have characters from one story pop up in another story. No, but I want at the end to have this feeling that they're all living at this time, you know. because one of the things that I'm interested in is the way that social media and the internet and, you know, news goes so fast. So the thing that at the moment is popping up in most of the stories is the guy who falls through a sinkhole.
I just was going to say the sinkhole appeared. I've written down sinkhole, but I suppose because this is definitely a worldview where the planet we are living on it's not Agatha Christie where it's all very safe, cozy. This is a world that is in trouble, and you know, physical world. And what is amazing, the likes of I can't think of her name. I think it's taught from the eye, so I don't know. I was trying to find Eugene's girlfriend, the narrator's name.
Yeah.
But I'm like, the fires are like around the corner. Are you insane? Like, how are you not fleeing? It's like the dithering is.
You don't. You know, there's in that story, I do mention normalcy bias,
yes.
which I got out of, by the way, the kind of preppers manuals, because I've been reading a lot of preppers manuals. And normalcy bias is either that things are changing so slowly around you that, you know, you kind of, it's normal. You know, I mean, like, for example, in the estuary in Clonakilty in the winter, there are no more lapwings. There's no more like huge clouds of curlews, but it's kind of normal, you know, because it's happened slowly. The other thing is sometimes when the normal changes overnight, you just go, oh, no, this can't be happening. No, this can't be happening. I don't believe it. It can't be happening. What?
Yeah.
What? There's a fire. You know, there's fires in Bandon. What? You know, and so you just and you don't adapt either, you know. So yeah, I think I'm looking at those. But I think once I get all the stories done, I'm going to be feeding bits of not the characters, but the stories. So that if she is sitting there watching the news, she may also be watching the fact that it's flooding in this other city. And you know, making some comment like, isn't that crazy? We're on fire, they're flooding. Because we are living that at the moment.
Yes.
Things go so fast that a guy who falls through a sinkhole waiting for the bus, if it's videoed, by tomorrow, there's some guy in Cameroon who's going to his friend, hey, look at this guy, he just fell through, you know.
God, yeah. Because it's I know, yeah, you're right about especially about the fires. We get every summer there's a fire, awful fire somewhere in the world, and it's just every summer. So, because even as you were talking there, I was like, oh my goodness, like Killarney National Park, like huge section of that burnt down this year, and I was like, it didn't even come. I'm amazed that didn't come straight to my mind as we're even reading that story. I'm like, have we just become so used to the fact that fires are now happening? You know, yeah.
Wave in the United States right now is because of COVID that we're not looking at it, you know?
Yeah.
It's crazy. And then I saw a video 2 days ago in Germany where they've had thunderstorms that have flooded and hail. So you've got this kind of like water coming down, you know, maybe a foot of water down a village, and it's got this much hail on top. It's the weirdest looking thing.
Wow.
Hi, you know? So
it's all.
Yeah, the idea is just to tell the normal sort of stories that I would, but to put them into this setting, into this context. And there is a little bit of kind of going, okay, I need a immigration story. Okay, I need a fire story. I need a flood story. At the moment, I'm writing a sea rise story.
Okay.
And heat story.
I just one thing I've noticed as well is there's definitely a sense of the redemptive quality in all these is certainly a female empowerment. I don't know if that was deliberately the case. I just thought Madame Meriki, my terrible French accent. But you know, the redemption is, you know, her helping this young man in Drag Race. Once again, you know, it's the mother and the daughters making a choice. In Rings of Fire, she makes a choice about the boyfriend, and even in the dithering.
In Rings of Fire, the couple, the friends, they're women.
Yeah.
Like the women came together to help each other.
Yeah. Oh no, the only reason I'm saying that is I heard somewhere recently, and maybe it's totally off the wall, but they're saying part of the problems of the world are because of this imbalance of genders. If more women were at the table saying, "This is happening to our kids,"
yes,
it would change narrative.
have the power.
Yeah. So so I thought it was interesting. There's
it's not on purpose. You know, it's not something I set out to do, but I guess it's very me. You know,
I suppose it draws on your previous writing
and
and
daughters, and also with Mahika. And I mean, you know, the drag race then becomes obviously a story of immigration and of refugees.
Yeah.
And in the last, after repeal, where I was extremely active, you know, I kind of hesitated for a long time about like my activism. It was kind of something a little on the side, you know. Repeal really just brought it out, you know. And when that was done, I was like, so what am I going to do now, you know?
Yeah.
And what was really breaking my heart was the whole immigration. And so I did go to Greece and work in a refugee camp for 8 weeks. And
wow.
I had already had, and I still have, a lot to do with the Direct Provision Center here in Clonakilty. And I teach English once a week, or have chats once a week with a Iranian refugee who lives in London on Zoom. So, you know, that was the redemptive power of doing something. As opposed to dithering, is very real for me. You know, it makes, instead of sitting there just going, oh, you know, to just do one thing, you know, just even once a week sit and Zoom and chat to Nahid, who has all sorts of questions about life in London, you know, that I can answer. You know?
That's because it is, and it's even what the UNESCO lady, what's her name, Lynn, was saying, that like it does get overwhelming, and you end up just being like, I'm going to end up doing nothing because I'm like, because I watched, do you know, Seaspiracy? I don't know if you've seen it. That nearly made me not get out of bed. Like I just was like, what?
Presented, you know,
it was devastating. I found
brought to all the workshops that I did, and any of, you know, kind of events that I did, is this idea that I found, which is called solastalgia. We are all suffering from solastalgia, which is a sense of homesickness while being home. So you're still where, you know, you haven't left, but it isn't, it's like, it's seeing the planet changing, because even if you are not from Australia, seeing those images, those koala bears, you know, you have a sense of loss, this terrible sense of loss. And we need to, you know, look at it and find ways to not just sit there and, you know, just bury our heads, but try and actually have some positive change.
No, which is, I suppose, what the whole point of the residency was, to not only was to raise awareness through storytelling and through creativity. Part of that was working with Mary Morrissey. Actually, we were going to talk about that. How did you find that in terms of writing the stories?
It became quite clear, because the thing also is, I mean, I haven't, because of pandemics and children, and both my parents passed away in the last few years. So all of that has put my writing just on the side, you know? So it was like, okay, it was time to pick it up again. And excuse me, there's always aids for emerging writers. I'm not quite sure what those are. You know, I think it's like, you know, what is emerge? Where emerge? What am I emerging from? And established writers or something else. And, you know, and a lot of those aids are for the unpublished, you know. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but once you get to a certain point, you tend to not take workshops, you tend to not go to classes. And now in the publishing world, editors no longer do the jobs that they used to do, which is basically hold your hand throughout the manuscript, you know?
Yeah.
And publishers, sorry, as well, they want a fully fledged manuscript, you know?
Yes.
And that's a great loss. So one of the things I did was I applied for a personal development grant from the Arts Council, so that during my residency and doing the writing, I would be able to have a mentor or an editor. And I chose Mary Morrissey because I think she's really, really good. She's got an eye. And also she said some very nice things about my first short story collection. So I thought, well, at least that means, you know, she likes the work.
No, she's great. She's smart but kind. You know, she's read bits of mine in the past, and I found her that perfect balance of insightful and supportive.
Also practical, like she'll say, why don't you, you know, this paragraph, it's in the wrong place, you know, stick it up there or do this.
Yeah.
So she's very, very good at that. And I found that just fabulous. The second part of the grant, I'm starting tomorrow, is I'm off to Tyrone Guthrie for 2 weeks.
Brilliant. Amazing. Yeah.
To continue writing. And so I'll have more to give to
stories. Brilliant. It's funny what you said there about, especially with kind of, oh, you're published now, you're no longer emerging, you've learned everything, tick, tick, tick. Like, I would dread to think that in 10 years' time, I wouldn't look back on the work I'm doing today and change something or feel like, you know, I've grown or I've changed it all. And, you know, it's funny because we were talking before this thing about the fiction and the friary and talking to Danielle and Madeline Darcy. And like Danielle McLaughlin's been published in the New Yorker and she still goes to a writing group and gets feedback. And I'm like,
oh, she got published in the New Yorker, you know, and
so
the writing group was specifically working with, you know, accomplished writers, get them into, you know, the higher level, you know, kind of magazines, etc.
So
and
I just,
you know,
but the idea that you suddenly have stopped learning, I think is definitely not the case. And
also, you know, really, I mean, you know, Jamie, when you start writing, it's the way it should be. You can't see the you know, the wood for the trees. You know, you're writing all this all over the place, and you're trying to put it into some sort of shape. But it's always been that way before. It's just the publishing industry has really changed. There was an editor, there was a somebody to come in and go, I mean, I remember my first novel, I delivered the first 25,000 words, and I was, you know, because it was like, okay, don't come to me until you have 25,000 words. And she said, this was Kate Cruz O'Brien.
Oh, yeah.
And she said, you know, it starts on chapter 4. And I was like, okay. That's, you know, 20,000 words are going to go in the bin. But I had to write myself into it.
Yeah.
And again, like chapter 4 started with Mary walked down the stairs, which meant, shit, this book's about Mary. You know, for me, before, this book was about this and this and this and this and some of that and a little bit of that, you know?
Yeah.
And she went, no, it's about her. Then you fight, you know, and you come back and forth. And now also, after all these years, I don't fight anymore. You know, you tell me, you know, somebody like Mary Morrissey, who I trust and I believe, I don't say, well, you don't understand this character. It's like, make that character do what I wanted it to do, you know? Or, you know, she can see that this character is actually going that way, and I'm pushing him to go that way. So for me, that was, there's 2 blessings about the residency. The first one is to actually, this is what I was meant to be doing, you know, writing. Have someone say to you, just like when you have a publishing contract already, someone say to you, this is what am I doing today? Shall I do laundry or shall I go? No, you're going to write a story, and I write another story. That was just a blessing. And then having Mary to be able to bounce stuff off. Because I mean, when I gave her like the stories that you've got now, they were very, very first draft, you know, and it was great because, you know, you're not quite sure where, you know.
No, I really enjoyed them. And I mean, Ring of Fire for me, I really loved. I really thought it was just of the 4 that I read. I just thought something about was taste the smoke in the air the whole time. I'm like, you're dancing on a volcano. What's wrong with you people? You know, I just felt there was this kind of constant sitting in the background of the whole story, this feeling of like environmental catastrophe, and everyone's quite blinkered to it. They just seem to be getting on with their lives. Yeah, which but that tension the whole time, I was like you're worried about your boyfriend, and like your city is about to like burn to the ground. But no, I really enjoyed them, and I think it's great that Cork City Libraries are creating this thing for, I suppose, creating awareness, but actually giving writers a chance, as you said, to have the space to write, you know, to give them the financial security for a period of time so they can get the work down.
Night and day. I mean, it's a complete different, you know, we all are incredibly insecure. You know, we all have those, and why am I writing, especially short stories? I mean, what am I writing this silly little story for, you know? And it just that little bit of validation that, well, you know, the library said that this is what I should be doing, and here's some money so you don't have to go looking for any jobs or whatever. It makes all the difference, you know. That's and great. Then having that, again, that financial support to be able to have someone like Mary Morrissey. You know, again, I think you just really honestly, these stories are just miles better than they would have been, or might never have even gotten written, you know.
I have one final question for you before I leave you go. And what was the most surprising thing you learned on the residency? I hope this isn't gonna
I think the most surprising thing that I've taken away from it, and which really I think I will be kind of continuing to push that one, is I sat down and I figured out how many kilometers were saved because of the remote thing, you know. And for me, it was something like 5,000 kilometers if I had been going in and out. So then I've been calculating, and like the workshop, if they were, you know, if they were coming in, you know, just 10 kilometers away, it was like 10,000, because there was 14 in the workshop, you know. And that, you know, part of that kind of positive climate solutions, if it hadn't been for the pandemic, we might have gone, oh, should we try to have a workshop that's on Zoom, you know, maybe.
Yes.
But this is the way to go. This is the way to go. That collaborative project between 6 women, some who had children underage, we would meet at 6 o'clock in the evening on a Tuesday. No way you'd get them at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday, because they got to get childcare, and then you have to drive, then you have to park the car, you have to pay for the parking. And so we really got to start using this as a tool. You know, this is the way to go. And like the nonfiction group, there was quite a lot of more elderly people, so they were really like, "Ooh, I don't like it." Now they love it. Now they chat, you know. So we really have to be looking at hybrid type events a lot more. And I mean, it's just marvelous, you know. That I know that you've got your new teaching courses online. You can have people from all over the world